PCBs fall into a category not only of compounds that are toxic and cause cancer, but as we know now, they alter hormone systems and they're called endocrine disruptors. This list was created in about 1993 by researchers who were studying some of these phenomena and the parallels between humans and wildlife. You'll also note that the neurotoxicology studies go back a number of years. They're based out of the Great Lakes. They're based on looking at women who ate fish out of the Great Lakes. Not an inordinately large amount of fish, sort of the average fish consumption rate for women in the Great Lakes area. They had neurodevelopmental problems in their children. And they followed this cohort for a number of years. We also find that there's been one investigation in North Carolina, and they found consistently the same thing. And in Europe, they've repeated these investigations with populations living around known sources of PCBs, and they've repeated those same results. So we're confident that, that PCBs cause a variety of health effects in people. Next slide. And the Jacobson's work over the last 20 years, 25 years, has demonstrated that quite dramatically, that we have these persistent effects that cause slight reduction in IQ, they cause attention deficit disorder, they cause these subtle changes in behavior that are manifested as larger consequences in humans when they get to be adults. And then we have the dioxin-like effects. And this slide simply summarizes one of the more dramatic situations that we have with dioxin, which is a carcinogen. It's classified so by NTP, National Toxicology Program, the World Health Organization, and EPA is, trying to decide whether to classify it as a known carcinogen or not. But one of the more dramatic ones was that a single dose of this compound given to experimental animals, rats, on just the right day of gestation for a pregnant rat can cause the offspring to have reproductive problems when they get to be adults. It occurs in both males and females, all strains of rats, mice, guinea pigs, hamsters. Go ahead, next slide, please. You get the point. And so we get to PCBs and where this fits for you. You're not alone in this. There are a large number of sites across the country that have Superfund sites contaminated with PCBs, and there are a large number of waterways that EPA said are too persistently poisoned by PCBs for them to easily use the normal permit process to control it. And so they have to do a special process called a TMDL. It's a mass balance. They have to go through the trouble of identifying all the PCBs in the system. Where do they come from? Where are they going? How can we control them? And every source gets to be a contributor to the source, to the solution as well as they had to the problem. You know a little bit about the history of the site. You know that the cleanup has been a fairly recent phenomenon, even though the contamination was not fairly recent, occurred over a number of years. This has only been in the last, well, less than 6 years now, as you can see, 03. Last fall, EPA, well, let's start just one step before that. In 2007, EPA completed and published an investigation report. It's called a remedial investigation. The investigation is designed to have enough samples taken so that we can identify the extent of the contamination and the nature of the problem. How bad is it? And what needs to be cleaned up? And then they go through the process of determining what are our different options for cleaning up. Well, they did that through 2007. And then they issued a plan, and they proposed a plan to clean it up, which involved removing soils from much of the Ward transformer site. And if you drive by there now, you'll think that the pile of dirt is large enough that they've already removed all of the transformer site. But they haven't. They still have more to remove. And the record of decisions, they will remove that soil, and it will be cleaned up from the PCBs. That is, they will put it through sort of an oven. It's a thermal desorber, is what it's called. It takes the PCBs off, and then they clean up that emission, extract the PCBs before the gases are released out the top of the pipe. And then they've got more soil to dig up. And they've got to go down the creek. And they will dig up more soil, and they will process that soil. Some soil will be carried off to a landfill. Much of that soil is being treated to have the PCBs removed. Unfortunately, and fortunately, they have to modify the creek. They have to go and dig up the creek bed. And this has happened at other places. And the good news is that you're going to remove them. The bad news is they've got to dig up the creek to do it. Well, the good news is this process has happened in other places, so there's some very capable experts who know how to examine the stream as it was beforehand so that we can put it back the way it was. In fact, I've seen a couple of places where they've done it. And the companies that do that are very good at it. The other part of the ROD, the record of decision, is not only are they going to dig up part of it, and you can look on the map and see exactly how far that goes down. They're going to count on natural processes, natural recovery, to take care of PCBs farthest away from the site. And my comments to EPA, I said they were relying too heavily on natural recovery. And they know that. And the reason is very simple, that I don't have a comprehensive listing of places where natural recovery has been used and works. I have a couple of places where it's been used, and it hasn't worked very well. I know of a couple of places where it's been tried, and we haven't had but a year or two go by, so we don't know if it's working. I have my experience on the James River, where in the 1970s, we tried natural recovery for ketone. Ketone is another chlorinated organic compound. It doesn't look exactly the same as PCBs, but it's got all those chlorine atoms, and it's got an odd organic matrix. And this year, when scientists from the Virginia Institute of Marine Sciences get fish tissue samples from the James River, they will find measurable levels of ketone. They will be very low. But in more than 30 years, the ketone has not gone away. The natural recovery has worked to bury the contaminated sediments under cleaner sediments, but it has not worked to cause the ketone to go away after 30 years and no production. And they've removed the source entirely. Fish consumption advisories have been in place for several years here in your bodies of water. We went to the records and we identified them. We go back to 2003, which is now 6 years ago. We expect that they're going to persist because of PCBs. And the fish advisories vary in their nature. Little Briar Creek, if you fish, don't eat them. Preferably don't fish. The problem is that we should not have a policy of needing to fence off our natural areas in order to protect us. The further problem is I have never, ever gotten those bald eagles to obey the don't eat the fish sign. I've never seen it happen. Maybe Drew can enlighten us on this a bit later. I've asked my expert bird biologist, a former faculty member, former professor of mine at the College of William and Mary, and I had this conversation, and I said, can't you get them to read the signs and not eat the fish? And he said, no, I can't. Neither the bald eagles, nor the cormorants, nor the osprey. Well, they're all going to be eating contaminated fish. The PCBs are found, as you've heard and as you need to know, all the way down to the main stem of the NEuse. They're also found in some of the waterways that aren't directly between the Ward Transformer site and the NEuse River, but that's a matter for a different meeting. The record of decision does have requirements for further sampling. And I think one of your roles as citizens is to, number one, help out with keeping people from catching and eating the fish, if there's something that you can do. But number two, you need to keep an eye on the cleanup. You're here all the time. You live here. You can drive by and see that things are going well. There's a very simple measure that from the road you can tell if things look right or not. Because two people who were down here with me from my office said, well, what do you think? And I said, well, the first thing you look at, what does the place look like? Is it orderly? Are things in place? Does it look like it is kept neat, clean, in order? Or are there things strewn about?